Here's what's ahead. China's AI edge, why Jensen Huang says Beijing could win, and what that means for U.S. power, prices, and jobs. The shutdown squeeze. Trump officials threaten a 10% cut to flights at 40 major airports. Safety move or political pressure, or both. A president groped in public. No, not the U.S. president. Claudia Sheinbaum files charges, turning a viral video into a national reckoning on harassment and security. That's in Mexico. Can a president tax by emergency? The Supreme Court's tough questions on tariffs, Congress's power, and the major questions doctrine. And the red apple panic, Murdoch's media socialism scare after Zohran Mamdani's win, why the coverage doesn't match New York's crime reality. All that and more today. Welcome to Filtered with TJ Walker. Hi, and welcome. Thanks for joining us today. Let's check in on yesterday's market vitals, as we always do. The S&P 500 closed at 6,796.29. That's up 0.37%. The NASDAQ Composite closed at 23,499.80. That's up 0.65%. Always keep in mind the long term. We stress long-term thinking around here at Filtered. Over the last 25 years, the S&P 500 has gone up on average 8.32% per year. The NASDAQ 100 has gone up on average 9.9% a year. So please keep in mind the average. Let's dive right in to issue one today. And it regards China and artificial intelligence. China will win the AI race, what Jensen Huang really meant. According to Reuters, NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang told the Financial Times, quote, China is going to win the AI race. Later on X, he clarified that China is nanoseconds behind and that it's vital that America wins by racing ahead and winning developers worldwide. The message isn't surrender, it's strategy. Huang argues the U.S. should keep the world, including China's massive developer base, on an American tech stack, even as Washington restricts China's access to the most advanced chips. President Trump has said NVIDIA's top Blackwell chips should be reserved for American customers. The stakes go far beyond silicon. Whoever leads sets standards, safety norms, app ecosystems, and the rules others build on. If China surges with domestic hardware and open weight models, global prices could fall, software margins could compress, and influence could shift. The race isn't only about speed, it's about who writes the rules and whether American developers remain the center of gravity. Okay, what's the real message here? Jensen Huang of NVIDIA has a bias. He's looking out for his own company, but he legitimately worries about China becoming number one in artificial intelligence, because whoever gets first to that holy grail of general artificial intelligence could control not just all of computing, but all of commerce and the whole world. And that's scary. Let's dig a little bit deeper here. This is obviously a complex issue where there are legitimate schools of thought on a lot of different sides. On the one hand, you can make the case that China, or that the U.S. should restrict Chinese access to our best technology. We don't want them to get ahead. On the other hand, that's simply motivating them to work even harder to develop their own proprietary technology, making it even better. It could ultimately strengthen them. Now, another case has been made by commentator Scott Galloway, who points out that his biggest fear is China really looks at this long term. And they think, how can we dominate the worldwide economy and destroy America? And the way to do it, he argues, is for China to simply release artificial intelligence, to release LLMs, to get better and better at it and just give it out for free. This would destroy American businesses who have to charge a huge premium for their artificial intelligence, their large language models. China could absorb the cost, the hit initially, because Chinese companies are not run for short-term profit. They're run for other larger strategic objectives. And if you're an American CEO of a high-tech company, your number one strategic objective is how do you book more revenue and profits in the next 90 days? So there is a bit of a mismatch here. Let's look at some more of the facts of the situation and the backdrop. So the U.S. does put limits on advanced NVIDIA chips. President Trump wants to reserve this Blackwell chip for Americans. And again, there is a legitimate case to be made for that. But there's also a case to be made that we want our stuff everywhere, selling everywhere, dominating the infrastructure, getting stronger as we go, building larger market share around the world, so we can't simply be destroyed. Now, the fear is if Chinese models scale, pricing power and moats in U.S. software weaken. I mean, if China just gets better and better at its artificial intelligence, and it really scales out, they could charge anything they want below U.S. prices, and U.S. companies are very vulnerable. And of course, the worst possible scenario for our entire U.S. economy is if suddenly they come up with something that's better than ours and it's free. Because let's not forget, all of the current gains of the stock market this year are from AI spending. If they're not making any revenue, it means our economy is either flat or in recession. That's not a good look for anyone in the United States. It's not a good look for your 401k, my retirement, anyone's stock portfolio. So it's a very much a legitimate concern. What can be done? Now, the United States cannot be like China, where the government is making huge decisions and allocating billions and billions of dollars in various sectors. We're not ever going to be quite that much of a command authoritarian economy. But we could be smarter. We could absolutely be smarter. And Jensen Huang is someone to be listened to. I mean, he's head of a $5 trillion company. He's created more market cap. He's created more shareholder value in a shorter period of time than any other human being in the history of the world. So I do think you have to listen to him carefully when he speaks, even if you think his constant wearing of a leather jacket, even in warm weather, is silly. He is a very serious and wildly successful person. What is going to happen? Is the real battle going to be between China and the United States? Time will tell. We'll be following this case very, very closely. Thanks so much for watching. We have a lot of stories coming up today. If you're new to Filtered, here's what we're about. I look at the top, typically 5 business stories, technology stories, and culture stories of the day, and then filter it through the communication lens and filter it through the prism of communication and personal development skills, all with the goal of improving you, making you more successful in your professional life and your personal life. So it's kind of a blend between news show, news analysis, and personal development. That's what makes it unique. My pledge to you is spend a little time with me each day, and you'll learn more about the world, but you'll also improve yourself so that you actually get better at all kinds of communication skills and personal development skills. The lesson here, of course, is when you speak in a way that makes people think, okay, you're looking out for something beyond yourself. Jensen Huang is not just talking up his book here. He's framing his arguments in terms of an entire society, the entire worldwide economy, and that is in part why he is extremely credible. More in a moment after these commercial words. We'll be right back after this break. Want more? Grab my 5-book success library for $9.95 at tjwalker.com/books. It's the fastest way to level up your communication. Imagine being the most confident person in the room, whether you're on Zoom or on stage. That's what thousands of professionals are learning to do right now through my online communication courses. At Media Training Worldwide, you can access my complete training library on demand, affordable, and actually effective. Whether you're preparing for media interviews, client presentations, or TED-style talks, I've got you covered. Check it out, MediaTrainingWorldwide.com. You'll never wing it again. We are back. I'm TJ Walker. This is Filtered. We're going to dive right into issue 2. Cut flights or risk chaos? Trump officials threaten 10% air traffic cut. According to the Times, the Trump administration says it will cut 10% of air traffic at 40 major airports if the federal government shutdown continues. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy frames the move as a safety measure to relieve unpaid controllers and warns of mass chaos if nothing changes. FAA Administrator Brian Bedford said officials are not going to wait for a safety problem, outlining a 4% reduction starting this Friday and ramping to 10% next week. Right as peak travel hits, airlines are scrambling for details, and analysts expect cascading cancellations at the nation's busiest hubs. Republicans like Senator Ted Cruz support the move as necessary. Democrats, including Representative Rick Larsen, call it unprecedented and demand that the FAA release the safety data behind the decision. Flight attendants warn that cutting flights affects medicine, food, and urgent travel, not just vacations. Bottom line, this is a pressure tactic designed to force a deal by putting the pain on travelers. Okay, what's the real message here? We are about to see a real slowdown of the airwaves in the United States. It's all well and good to say, oh, the federal government's bloated, let's just shut it down. But when you have to fly to Chicago or LA or New York or Des Moines for an important business deal or to deliver medicine to grandma who might die otherwise, all of a sudden this gets real. It's time to open up the government. Let's dig a little bit deeper here. So again, more background. These poor flight controllers, these air traffic controllers, the people who actually could decide whether you live or die, because if they just don't show up or fall asleep because they're now working 3 part-time jobs to pay their mortgage, if they fall asleep when 2 pilots are trying to figure out is the runway free, you and I could die. I have to tell you that this does concern me a great deal. I mean, in the next 2 months, I was planning on flying to North Carolina home for the holidays, was planning on going to New York, probably going to Taiwan, was even thinking of vacation in other Asian countries while over in Taiwan. So I had a lot of flight planned. I don't know if any of them are going to happen right now. So again, the facts of the case, the 4% cuts hit Friday, 10% next week at 40 key airports. Now, let's step back a minute and look at the messages going here. The administration and those aligned with the administration are saying, hey, this is why the Democrats should simply vote to extend the debt ceiling. All this goes away. That is their message. And they are framing this as this is a problem being caused by the Democrats. And hang on a minute, because I'm going to give you the Democratic side. I'm here as a sane, sensible centrist to really analyze messages in a fair way. So that is the Republican message. And I'm going to play it to you straight. What they are claiming is it's the Democrats' fault that the government is shut down and we don't have air traffic controllers. And it's entirely the Democrats' problem. That is intellectually dishonest. It's just not true. Now I'm going to give you the other side. The other side is the Democrats are saying, we're more than happy to open the government. We have legislation that would, in fact, open the government. All it takes is the senators to vote for it. What we want is to simply not double the healthcare cost of 20 million Americans. All we want is to continue the current level of funding to help 20 million Americans through Obamacare. And all you have to do is vote for that. And we're not asking for increasing benefits. We're not asking for some new infrastructure bill. We're not asking for some new welfare bill. The Democrats are saying simply maintain the current level of support for 20 million Americans who would otherwise see their health insurance double. And estimates are that 5 million Americans wouldn't be able to pay at all, even if they wanted to. So 5 million Americans would all of a sudden have no health care. So their point is very clear. We don't need to cut funding for some of the poorest Americans and throw them on the street without health care just to fund a tax cut for the wealthiest Americans. That's their message. And it is truthful. It is absolutely the truth. Now, here's the third option. The third option is the Republicans could simply end the filibuster and open the government, fund any debt ceiling they want today. They could do it in 5 minutes. Again, a little context. We've talked about this before. This is one of these weird things about U.S. government where the senators, it's not in the Constitution, the senators just decided one day, hey, we might be in the minority one day, whether you're in the majority today or the minority, and it would be nice to have extra power and clout if you're a member of the minority party. So we're going to change the rules. Instead of running this organization in a democratic way, we're going to say it's got to be something kind of like that, but will require 60 votes to pass legislation, not a simple majority of 50 or 51, since there's 100 senators. It's just an agreement that they support in the beginning of each Senate term. They could easily, like that, just call a vote and say, how many of us would like to have a rule where legislation passes with a majority rule? They could do that in 5 minutes, and it would only take 51 Republican senators say yes, and that would be it. Then they could have a vote to extend the debt ceiling, whatever they want. They could do whatever they want at that point. The Democrats would have zero power. President Trump, to his credit, has called for them to do that. And the Republicans are like, look, we'll do anything you want, but we're not going there. Because we're looking forward to the day when you're gone, and we have to plan for the day when the Republicans might be in the minority in the Senate, although that doesn't look likely anytime soon. But they're unwilling to give up that power. So those are the messages. There are some convoluted messages. There are some mixed messages. Either party could end this now. What you have to do, certainly if you're a citizen of the United States, but if you are just a concerned citizen of the world and interested in this, you do need to know that, in fact, either party could end it and what the rationale is for the party doing it. At this moment, according to various public opinion polls that are scientifically conducted, about 10% more Americans blame Republicans for the government shutdown than do the Democrats. Now, millions and millions of Americans do blame the Democrats. So this is not 100% clear cut, but at the moment, more American voters blame the Republicans for the shutdown. Those are facts. I'm here to provide you analysis, but I also do provide facts. And then you and I can analyze them together. You may come up with different conclusions than I do. But we are going to stick with objective facts as a starting point for this show and for discussion. Let's look at some more facts. Again, the head of the government in charge of flight, Sean Duffy, says it's going to be mass chaos if this shutdown persists. The Democrats are saying, give us the data showing this. I mean, I do think it's pretty clear cut that if you just never, ever pay people, at some point, they're going to stop showing up for work. Number one. Number two, their morale is going to be so low. They're going to be angry and upset. I don't know about you. I don't want an angry, upset air traffic controller, bitter, thinking about, wow, now my credit's destroyed because I couldn't make my car payment because these imbeciles in Washington can't get their action. I don't want that person making a life and death decision for me and my family when we are hurling through space in metal objects thousands of feet above the ground. I don't want a person in that mental state. I want a person who's sort of happy, relaxed, and 100% focused. Now, holidays are coming up. There's Thanksgiving, there's Christmas holidays, end of year, New Year's holidays. So this is the time of year when transportation needs skyrocket, especially the day before Thanksgiving is, according to some, the busiest travel day of the year. I was planning on leaving that Tuesday of that week of Thanksgiving for flights. I don't know if I'll be able to. I may have to drive 800 miles, which I'm not looking forward to at all. Let me hear from you. How are you going to cope? If you are an American and you fly a lot or are planning on flying, are you feeling comfortable and confident that your flight's going to be safe? If you'd like to weigh in on this, if you're watching us live on TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, X, and today we're also on Pod TV, as well as Roku and Amazon Fire. If you're on any of those outlets, weigh in. All you have to do is post comments right here. You could also go to my YouTube channel at any point. It's TJ Walker Success on YouTube. Go to the post tab and you can leave a comment. But if you're watching or listening live, please post your comments now and I will share those with the audience. Lots more news to come, lots more issues to filter through the lens of communication and personal development. Back in a moment. Want to communicate like a pro? Go to MediaTrainingWorldwide.com. Millions have already transformed their speaking skills. Why not you? This show doesn't run on a lot of corporate sponsorships or big media backing. It runs on caffeine and your support. If you like what you're hearing and want to say thanks, you can buy me a coffee. Really. Just go to buymeacoffee.com/TJ Walker. It's quick, it's easy, and yes, it helps cover editing, hosting, and staying relatively ad-free for as long as possible. Buymeacoffee.com/TJ Walker. Your $3.95 makes a real difference. Want live coaching from me? Bonus episodes? Full course access? It's all waiting at tjwalker.com/members. Join now. Okay, we are back. Thanks so much for joining me today. Issue 3. If it can happen to the president, Sheinbaum files charges after street groping. According to the Times, Mexico's president, Claudia Sheinbaum, filed a police complaint after she was groped in Mexico City's historic district. An incident captured on video and shared widely. If I don't file a complaint, then what message does that send to all Mexican women? She said at her daily news conference. Harassment is a crime in the capital, but not nationwide. Sheinbaum urged a review so women across Mexico can press charges as she did. She said the man who was arrested appeared intoxicated. Well, that's not a surprise, and had accosted other women the same day. Despite criticism over limited security, she vowed to keep mingling with citizens. We can't be far from the people. The episode sparked a wider debate about women's safety, reporting obstacles, and the line between visibility and vulnerability. The larger point is painful and familiar. What was caught on video reflects what many women describe as everyday harassment, even in broad daylight. Okay, what's the real message here? Creeps everywhere, you're on notice. The days of just grabbing people, doing whatever you want and getting away with it, yeah, it still happens, but it's so much easier to be caught today because everywhere, whether you like it or not, we live in a surveillance state. There's video cameras on you. There are other cameras on you. And if you do something obnoxious, good chance you'll be caught, punished, and ridiculed worldwide. And that's a good thing. Let's go a little deeper here. So, and I'm sorry I don't have the photo to show it. I thought I did, but there are photos all over the internet showing dramatically, just obnoxiously. I believe this is the man. This is not the main photo. This is not what he groped, folks. He was groping, and in a very inappropriate place to grope a man or a woman, shall we say. And he was caught. They're filing charges. The president is filing charges. Good for her. Good for her. That's the main point, I have to say. It does seem bizarre to me, and I'm sure many of you who are women watching this will say, well, TJ, that just shows you are in a bubble. That's your perspective. And I admit that. I agree. I don't really have a problem with people groping me. Although I will tell you, I don't mean to make light of it. I was groped once when I was about 21 years old, driving a car, and a friend of a friend who I was giving a ride to another party, he simply grabbed me, shall we say, down yonder. And I was able to, fight him off, kick him out of the car, and sort of laugh about the incident. But you know what? It's not a laughing matter. Once in my entire life, when I didn't feel physically threatened, yeah, it's no big deal. But for many women around the world, this is a daily occurrence. So I'm glad to see the president of Mexico essentially standing up for all women and saying, okay, I'm not just going to ignore it, and I'm not going to try to cover it up because I don't want criticism of people attacking me for my lack security detail. I'm going to actually file charges on this. So the man was identified, which is easy to do. He apparently was drunk. Obviously, why else would you do that, or on some kind of drug? Here's the larger context and why I find this fascinating, is that there's been an awful lot about the loss of privacy in the world because of modern technology. And yeah, I do think that's a very real issue, especially as you and I continue to give so much information to chatbots and to Facebook, where they then harvest all that data about us and then sell it to advertisers for the rest of our lives. That's a big problem. I am less troubled by video cameras and other cameras out in public everywhere recording things. Could it be used inappropriately? Could people be extorted because they're caught having an affair or something like that? Yes. But it's also an absolutely fantastic way to catch criminals in the act. Because in the olden days, if you are trying to indict a criminal and you say, well, this witness says they saw him this, and this witness says they saw him attack this person, the other side could say, well, I've got a witness saying, the suspect was home in bed. It's much easier to indict someone today when you can say, okay, here's the suspect. We think this person attacked this person over here at 12:02 a.m. on this street corner. And by the way, here's a video from this security camera clearly showing his face doing it. Here's another video from another security camera showing him clearly. Here's the third. At that point, it's pretty easy to get the indictment. It's also pretty easy to get a conviction. So I think this is one of the major reasons why we have seen crime plummet, especially in big cities where there are more video cameras everywhere. The higher density of people with more and more security cameras. And that's why, frankly, the crime rate in New York City has dropped dramatically over the last 30 years compared to rural areas where they don't have security cameras everywhere. I think this is a major reason for that. It doesn't get enough attention. So, yeah, do we have a problem with too many people giving away willingly information about themselves to big tech companies? Yes, but simply letting people know, any company or the police, where you are on a public street and what you're doing, to me, that is the least offensive violation of your privacy. Let's look at some more facts here. There are geotag network cams that help police identify suspects and patterns very quickly. There are 500,000 cameras, an entire network in the Bengaluru network, 500,000 cameras. The other factor is most people these days at some level know you're in public, you're being watched. And I happen to think just the knowledge of that creates better behavior. Now, there was a time, I'm not saying I would ever do it, but let's say 30 years ago, your paper's not delivered, your next door neighbor paper is delivered, and you're in an apartment building, it's 4 feet from your door. It was pretty tempting to just say, oh, let me pick up, read their newspaper for a couple minutes, put it back down. Most people I know would be afraid to do that now because you're fearful that it will be captured on video. Someone sees it. Before you know it, the police are knocking on your door for theft, tampering. Because most people, unless you've really got to 8 in the morning or 7 in the morning, you're not drunk then. If you are drunk at night or midday, as this gentleman, and I'm using the word gentleman facetiously, he was apparently drunk and was groping women, including the president of a country. So put me down on record as being a fan of video surveillance. Now, I don't think people should be surveilled in private. If you're running an Airbnb and you're putting cameras up in bedrooms and in bathrooms and showers, well, that's sick and criminal. And there should be punishments. But if you're in a public square, especially this main downtown square in Mexico City, which I've been to many times, and it's beautiful and it's festive, you should assume you're being recorded. And you should, in fact, be on your best behavior. Are there problems with the technology? Yes. There can be cases where there's misidentification of faces. Let's admit it. Some faces look more like other faces. There's also the problem of skin tone, of sometimes the cameras not accurately seeing and capturing people of especially darker skin tones. That could be a problem. There's a problem. Someone could be falsely arrested. But again, with other aspects of technology, with geotagging, if someone just like me is seen, and I wouldn't do this obviously, but if someone who looks just like me is caught groping the president of Mexico yesterday at 9 a.m., I could simply show the police my cell phone and it would see the geolocation of my cell phone and I could show that I was on it. Plus I could show the fact that I'm right here in this studio with you. So there are other technology fixes for this as well. Anyway, I'm sorry the president of Mexico has to go through that. You would think your career gets to the point where you have the most prestigious, powerful position in an entire vast country like Mexico and bodyguards, that you would not be subjected to this sort of indignity. But apparently that would be an incorrect assumption. Okay, more in a moment. We'll be talking about the Supreme Court here in the United States reviewing tariffs. Back in a moment. We'll be right back after this break. Want more? Grab my 5-book success library for $9.95 at tjwalker.com/books. It's the fastest way to level up your communication. Imagine being the most confident person in the room, whether you're on Zoom or on stage. That's what thousands of professionals are learning to do right now through my online communication courses. At Media Training Worldwide, you can access my complete training library on demand, affordable, and actually effective. Whether you're preparing for media interviews, client presentations, or TED-style talks, I've got you covered. Check it out, MediaTrainingWorldwide.com. You'll never wing it again. Want to advertise? Okay, we are back. Now, I promised you the photo, and I was here all along, and I just messed up. Again, I'm not trying to be, gratuitous or or pander to prurient interests. But I mean, here is this guy in broad daylight in the center of downtown Mexico, just walked up to the president of Mexico and groped her. I mean, it really is astounding. And perhaps a reminder, limit your alcohol consumption to no more than one or two drinks. And don't let that embolden you. For some people, it puts them to sleep and makes them docile. For others, it results in something like this, which is not just inappropriate, it is illegal, although it's not illegal in all parts of Mexico, believe it or not. But it is in Mexico City. So sorry the president had to go through that. Let's move on to issue 4 today. Can a president tax by, quote, emergency? What the justices probed. At the Supreme Court yesterday, justices from both wings questioned whether the International Emergency Economic Powers Act lets a president impose sweeping tariffs by declaring an economic emergency. Chief Justice John Roberts and Justices Amy Coney Barrett and Neil Gorsuch pressed the government on where Congress ever authorized tariffs in the IEEPA's text, which speaks of regulating importation, not duties or impost. Justice Sam Alito sounded most receptive to the administration's view, while Justices Kagan, Sotomayor, and Jackson were plainly skeptical. A core theme was separation of powers. Gorsuch warned that tariffs are, quote, taxes by another name. Now, he's not alone in that. Most mainstream economists view that as well. And he asked whether emergency delegations created a one-way ratchet that shifts congressional's taxing power to the executive. Even if foreign affairs deference applies, several justices suggested the major questions doctrine could still control. A ruling is expected next year. If the administration loses, it can pivot to other trade statutes, but refund fights and policy turbulence may follow. Okay, so what's the real message here? The Supreme Court is listening to this argument that Donald Trump says, it's an emergency. I should be able to impose tariffs anytime, anywhere I want. And a lot of them, even the conservatives, are saying, well, wait a minute. A tariff is really a tax. There's no big emergency here. The Constitution says Congress has the ability to tax, not the president. So this is not adding up. Let's go a little deeper here. Now, does this mean what Trump has done will be viewed as unconstitutional? Maybe, maybe not. This Supreme Court has often bent over backwards, being deferential to this president, saying time and time again, hey, you can do what you want, even though many, many legal theorists believe it's unconstitutional. They've been extraordinarily reluctant to rein in this president. Now, there are, of course, many in America who have never gotten over the Gore v. Bush decision, which unilaterally stopped the count for the presidential election in 2000, handing the presidency to George W. Bush, even though numerous experts doing an unbiased assessment of Florida votes think that Gore actually won Florida and therefore the election. But for many Americans, the Supreme Court these days is nothing but another political apparatus. It's essentially a division of a political party. It's almost as if it were the policy arm of the RNC, the Republican National Committee. So to many Americans, the Supreme Court lost all shred of credibility years ago. So it would surprise virtually no Democrat or even centrist if the Supreme Court says, okay, you kind of sort of shouldn't have done this, but hey, you're the executive, do what you want. Now, that's not legalese, obviously. That's not how they would say it. But that is essentially what the decision would say if they side with the administration. It is going to be interesting, though, because Gorsuch put his finger on it, which is this is really taxation. And the government, especially those who believe in the original intentions of the founding fathers, clearly gave the power to tax to the Congress, not the president. And he points out if the president can just declare emergency and do any tax he wants, then it would take a supermajority to ever take that power back. So you have kind of a one-way system where a president could get more powerful and more powerful and more powerful because it would be too hard for a supermajority in Congress to take that power back. That rightfully does concern the so-called strict constructionists who believe that the founding fathers did not want a president who had the power of a king to just issue decrees. So, as I mentioned, the decision might not come for a while. You never can tell exactly what the United States Supreme Court is doing based on their questions, but it often is an indication of their thought process. And Sam Alito, according to most experts who listened to the entire Supreme Court hearings yesterday, seemed to be suggesting he was all in. Trump administration, whatever you want to do, sign me up. Here's a blank check. That's the assessment of most fair-minded observers. But Neil Gorsuch, he was not on board. Amy Coney Barrett, not on board. And obviously the sort of three Democratic appointees perceived as more liberal votes did not appear to find the arguments of the Supreme Court or of the administration persuasive at all. Again, to frame this, what the president is doing is saying there's a special emergency. There was legislation in Congress saying that for special emergencies, the president can intervene in trade issues and tariffs. So the president's saying there's a special emergency. That's why he needs to put this tariff on. It's just a bit of a stretch. Now, I'm coming to you as a sane, sensible centrist. Of course, there are those on the radical left, as small as that might be in America, who would say that anything the Trump administration does is just lying and nonsense. But there are plenty of centrist and right-of-center thinkers, people who consider themselves conservatives, who would say, by no normal understanding of the English language or of legalese was the United States in a trade emergency around the world. Our economy is continuing to grow. We have, by some measures, still the largest, biggest, richest economy in the world. Unemployment is relatively low. Inflation is not nearly as high as it was a few years ago, whether it's 3% or a little higher. You can quibble over that. But by every objective measure, the United States economy is in pretty good shape. And don't listen to me, that's what the Trump administration has been saying, taking credit for it. So how do you go from the economy is humming along rather swimmingly to there's an emergency, we have to put 100% tariffs on people? So there's an internal contradiction with the arguments of those trying to claim this is justified because it is in fact an emergency. It is important for many reasons, because what if the Supreme Court says, okay, these are clearly illegal, eliminate them? Will the Trump administration actually follow it? Or will they just say, hey, I've got the guns, I got the military, I can do what I want, and you can just stuff it, Supreme Court? There's certainly many who fear that that could be the response. We'll be monitoring it here in the coming months, right here on Filtered, and giving you an honest assessment as a sane, sensible centrist. If you're just joining us for the first time, thanks so much. My name is TJ Walker. Why am I here? I've been a news analyst for 40 years, but I've also been someone who primarily spends his time training and coaching people like you, executives, CEOs, politicians, billionaire fund managers, and also young kids right out of school on how to communicate effectively and have personal development habits to lead you to success. So I'm bringing that expertise to you right here every day on this show, where we look at the top issues of the day and then analyze them through the lens of communication skills and personal development skills. If you are listening on any podcast platform, thank you. Thank you very much. We are new on the podcasting platforms. It's only been about 2 months since we started this show. So please make sure to follow the show, subscribe to it. If there's a subscribe button, there's no charge for doing so. And please leave a review. Okay, it's a big political week here in the United States. Big elections happened on Tuesday. Still a lot of spillover analysis. We'll be getting into how the media, particularly conservative media, is handling what's going on in New York City right now, what the messages are, but really what the underlying political objectives and ramifications are of the messaging around the new mayor of New York City. All that and more. Imagine having a communication coach who never sleeps. Meet your new secret weapon, the TJ Walker AI clone. Go to tjwalker.ai and start getting custom coaching 24/7. No scheduling, no hourly fees. I've trained presidents, prime ministers, and Fortune 500 CEOs, but the same exact communication I've delivered to world leaders is now available to you online, anytime at MediaTrainingWorldwide.com. Whether you're speaking on camera, pitching a client, or handling a crisis, you need these tools. These aren't fluffy motivational videos. They're practical, battle-tested techniques to help you speak clearly, competently, and persuasively. Go to MediaTrainingWorldwide.com and take your communication to the next level. Got feedback or a question for me? I actually read them, and if you send one, I'll send you a free mini course as a thank you. Just head to tjwalker.com/feedback. Ever wish you could just ask me your question live? Now you can. Every week I go live with members only. On YouTube, it's called TJ Live. I review pitches, fix presentations, and answer your questions on the spot. It's interactive, personal, and hands-on. If you want real-time coaching in a small group setting, go to tjwalker.com/live and become a member. This isn't passive content. It's a two-way conversation. The Red Apple Panic. Murdoch Media's script, not New York's reality. According to the Times, right-wing media outlets torched Mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani as a socialist menace with a viral New York Post cover and Fox host warning New York could turn into Caracas, as in Venezuela. Strip out the theatrics and the data tell a different story. New York is not the New York of the 70s. It's certainly not Caracas. Let's just look at some facts regarding crime, for example. Murders peaked at 2,245 in 1990. Roughly 31 per 100,000 residents. In 2023, however, New York recorded only 386 homicides, about 4 per 100,000. Now, still too many, but it's a sustained, dramatic decline. Yet New York remains a national stage and a convenient foil. So crime coverage rises even as crime trends improve. Some commentary veered into Islamophobia simply because the new mayor is not Christian or Jewish, which is the typical situation for a New York City mayor. But the broader narrative is politics first, facts later. Many Republicans represented in metros today have higher homicide rates than New York, despite the outsized focus on the city. Add New York's mystique and the fact that roughly 4 in 10 Americans have never visited New York City, and the perception gap widens. The panic is less about public safety and more about national conservative branding. Okay, what's the real message here? Conservative media, the New York Post, Fox News, they are absolutely freaking out about this new mayor of New York City. Is it because he's really done anything scary, or he can even raise taxes by 1%, which he's not going to be able to do? No, it's about political branding. Rupert Murdoch realizes that the easiest way to get people agitated and scared and angry and clicking and sharing is to tell them their life is about to be destroyed. Not that there's going to be small incremental change from a new mayor whose policies aren't that much different from any other mayors. So New York City becomes a symbol to many red state voters of liberal extremism and socialism and communism and unchristian behavior. And Rupert Murdoch and his minions in the media, his various henchmen, realize if you just hit it again and again and again, you can taint the entire brand of the Democratic Party. So if you are a right of center or a centrist Democrat running for Congress in Iowa, and you've never even been to New York City, now you're giving ammunition to the Republicans and saying, hey, you're just like those socialists in New York City, aren't you? And that is why you're hearing about this, not because of any real threat or danger. Let's dig a little bit deeper here. This has gone on for a long time, this hysteria, because let's face it, it sells newspapers. It gets people glued to their TV sets. As I mentioned to you earlier in the week, I think that both sides are misunderstanding the significance of Mamdani's win and what it's going to do, because the reality is political power in New York City is very diffuse. Yes, it's a strong mayorship. It's not a city manager type of thing, but he can't just raise taxes. The legislature has to do that. He can't just run huge deficits to give everyone free stuff because there's a balanced budget requirement. There's so many things that he might want to do to make the United States, no, not more like communist Cuba or 1980s Soviet Union, but there are plenty of things he might like to do to make New York City more like Copenhagen, which is a fantastic place and is often run by social democrats and democratic socialists, very similar ideologies to his. But he's just not going to be able to do it because the legislature has the power, the governor has the power, the city council has power. He has the power to put a spotlight on problems, to come up with 5, 10, 20, 30 ideas of things that he think might improve it. And then maybe he'll get half a loaf, or in this case, a slice or two to make things better for his pet issue of affordability. And I'll just go ahead and go on record as saying, I think one of his suggestions, rent control, always backfired. I've lived in New York City, and I knew plenty of rich people who lived in rent controlled apartments, and I couldn't get one, even though at the time I was poor. And it helped create an environment where most developers, real estate developers, are like, New York City, it's too much of a headache. You can't make money. And the regulation, the rent control, it stifles development. So I'm not endorsing certainly every one of his proposals, but the idea that this is going to become Caracas is an absolute absurdity. Let's not forget, New York City has more successful people, more successful capitalists per square inch than any city in America and arguably the world. It is a city, it's the finance capital of the world. And he didn't come in and steal the election. I mean, he got more than 1 million votes. No one's gotten 1 million votes since John Lindsay in the 1960s. I mean, this guy has a huge, huge groundswell of support. Now, I do want to give credit to a number of capitalists, Jamie Dimon, the CEO of Chase, Bill Ackman, very controversial hedge fund managers, but both of those men reached out to the new mayor, and they didn't just say, well, we're big billionaire capitalists and we hate you and we're moving to Florida. No, they said, let us know if we can help you. Let us know if we can work with you. You, of course, didn't see them get tons and tons of airtime in conservative media. Why? because it's not scary. Again, I want you to understand the media ecosystem we live in. If you are an editor at a major newspaper or a TV station, you're not going to get a reward. You're not going to get a ratings bump saying, there's been an election, there's a new mayor or governor or senator, and chances are things are not going to be that much different. There's going to be small incremental change in one direction or another. You'll be fired if you run that. The problem is that may actually be the truth. If you are in the media, you're trying to find the most extreme thing that you can highlight to agitate people, especially people who are part of your base core audience. But you're being manipulated here. Let's not make any mistake about it. I could go around right now in any rural district in America and ask them, hey, where's crime higher, New York City or your town? And I guarantee you about 98% of people, it's much higher in New York City. Because if someone's pushed off a subway in New York City, there's going to be news editors from Fox and the New York Post and other places putting the spotlight on that and talking about it nonstop. When someone is shot at the local filling station in a small town, chances are no one even hears about it. It certainly doesn't get national news. And especially when their local news reporter probably went out of business a few years ago, even people in the neighborhood might not know. Let's look at some interesting facts here, because again, New York City is such a symbol of liberal excess, of Democrats gone wild, and is supposedly such a hellhole that people's perception is crime is so much worse there. And that's one of many reasons of why you wouldn't want someone like Mamdani running it. So in Oklahoma City, the 5th congressional district, you have 10 to 11 people per 100,000 murdered. 10 to 11 people out of every 100,000 people in a conservative Republican state like Oklahoma were murdered in 2023, much higher than the murder rate of New York City. Tulsa, Oklahoma, again, this big conservative Republican state in the 1st congressional district, 11 to 12 people are murdered in 2023, dramatically less than what has happened in New York City. Again, now it's only 4 per 100,000 in New York City. Jacksonville, Florida, another big Republican stronghold, double-digit murder rate in 2023. So there is perception and there's reality. There's the perception that big cities that are controlled by these far left liberals, and in this case, Mamdani actually is a far left Democrat, it is run in such a way that there's massive crime everywhere. And the facts just don't bear it out. Now, you might still not want to vote for Mamdani. Not sure I would have. You might not even want to visit New York City. That's okay. But you owe it to yourself to get an accurate picture of reality. Now, a lot of people do like New York City. It has 65 million visitors in 2024. I was one of them. I lived there for many years, still have family and friends there, and I like to go back frequently. If the airports are actually working, I will be back there in the holiday time. And I got to tell you, I will feel much safer there than walking around the streets of South Florida, where places like Fort Lauderdale, the violent crime is much higher than New York City, even though we have nice law and order governors down here. Okay, we're going to switch to our grab bag section. I want to thank you for joining. This concludes the main portion of the show where we look in depth at 5 key issues every day. But there's always some other issues that just bear mentioning that I have to put a spotlight on. So we put these in the grab bag section of the show. Exxon is in the news. Exxon's shadow climate campaign. This is interesting, and you probably didn't hear about it. Newly revealed documents obtained by DeSmog and reported by The Guardian show that Exxon funding the Atlas network in the late 1990s and 2000s to translate denialist materials, climate change denialists. And they did this throughout the United States. They fed this skepticism in Latin America. They staged events at undermining the UN climate process. The files included copies of Exxon's checks and behind-the-scenes strategy notes. Atlas now says the memos came from former staff and that Exxon hasn't donated in close to 2 decades. Exxon did not comment. So what does this really mean? What I'm talking about here is what big corporations historically did a lot of, is they would give propaganda to organizations and say, put this out as a think piece, at a conference, as an editorial, and don't say we gave you any money. So they're basically buying ideas that help them politically help their agenda. And in this case, it was Exxon trying to chip away at people's belief that climate change is real. And I'm sorry, folks, climate change is real. I'm here as a sane, sensible centrist. There's no sane, sensible centrist in the world who doesn't think that climate change is real and that humans are a significant contributor to that, and human activity. So Exxon, wanting people to think, hey, let's not worry about that. Let's just burn as much oil as we can. No need to worry. Funneled this out there. Now, oil companies in the past, and all sorts of companies have done this. What I do remember many years ago was Herb Schmertz, who was the PR guy for, I think it was ExxonMobil at the time. He had the decency, or his company had the decency, to clearly identify. He would write a column that was kind of like a news column, often had nothing to do with oil or energy, but it labeled his name, and they bought it as a paid ad. I believe it appeared in even the New York Times or perhaps Wall Street Journal. It was labeled. Nothing wrong with major corporations wanting to share their view directly with transparency. It is a problem when you're doing it all secretly and people are getting all of these information sources. So, well, this person said global change isn't real, and this person says global change isn't real, climate change isn't real, and here's another source, and they're all unrelated, and none of them were ads. I guess I have to conclude it must be true. And the problem is, if one company is writing the check for all those people, and you don't know who they are, it can really distort your perception of reality. So I want to thank The Guardian for bringing this information to light, because I didn't see it in any other American media. It might be out there. But it is important to get information sources beyond your one favorite newspaper. So I do look to The Guardian from time to time, as I look to the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, and the New York Times, and the Drudge Report. Which leads us to our next grab bag issue. The New York Times reports a 4,600 subscriber surge. Good news for them. That's 460,000 digital-only editions in the quarter, bringing total subscribers to roughly 12.3 million and profit up 26%. Meanwhile, Northwestern's Medill research counts more than 3,200 newspaper closures here in the United States since 2005, including over 100 in the last year alone, leaving tens of millions in news deserts. Fewer local watchdogs mean more room for national narratives to dominate. And in many metros, including Southern California, the Times often outdraws local outlets online. That's right. It's hard for me to believe that, but was reported by Ezra Klein earlier this week that the New York Times is actually the most popular subscribed newspaper in Southern California, not the LA Times. So this has profound implications for democracy, for media, for our understanding of the world. Now, Ezra Klein has spoken about this quite eloquently in one of his recent podcasts, but it's essentially nationalized all conversations. Now, look, I like the New York Times. I think that they do quality journalism. There's plenty of things I don't like about the Times and certain biases they have, but they do quality journalism. There is a real problem, though, if they are crowding out all local news. I mean, and I'm guilty of this too. Yes, I know who the new mayor of New York City is going to be. I'm not sure I know who the mayor is of the town I live in Florida. Now, I just moved to this town 3 months ago. Still, that would not have happened 30, 40, 50 years ago. I would know my local mayor first. My question to you, do you even know the mayor of your town? Because I'm pretty sure you know who the president is. If you follow this show, you know who the mayor of New York City is or the mayor-elect. But I noticed this, a few years ago, a handful of years. I moved from the New York area to South Florida, not because I didn't like a mayor. And I tried to be a good citizen. I signed up, I paid for a subscription to the Palm Beach Post, the local newspaper in the county where I lived. And I paid them a monthly subscription fee for the online version. And what I quickly found was there was no news there. The only thing I saw was news about celebrities who'd bought $30 million, $40, $50 million mansions in Palm Beach Island, which I frankly didn't care about. And then news about celebrities spotted in hot restaurants, which I also didn't care about. And everything else was news from the Associated Press, which I could get any other news site or just going to apnews.com or .org. So I pretty quickly realized it's a waste of time. And I paid for a year's subscription, but I don't think I really went to the newspaper after the first couple of months because there just was no news there. And at the time, I was living in a village called Delray Beach, and I didn't see any coverage about what was going on. I don't even know who the mayor of Delray Beach is right now, and I'm a news junkie. So the other thing I noticed at conversations at the Starbucks right in downtown Delray Beach, where I would often start every morning, I never heard anyone talk about by name local city commissioners, local county commissioners, mayors. Everything was about national politics. A part of it was the New York Times. A part of it was major cable news networks. So this is a huge problem when everything is nationalized. And I'm glad New York Times is on stable footing. It certainly does not look like they're going out of business anytime soon. But the New York Times, no matter how good they are, they cannot cover city commission meetings and school board meetings in mid-sized towns in America or small towns. They just can't do it. And they're not trying to do it, nor should they. That's not their role in life. But it's a problem for democracy. And I'll tell you exactly what it translates to. Just a few years ago, when George Santos ran for Congress, he actually ran from the district where I used to live. I did not vote for him, but I was in a district that he represented in Congress. How did he get away with it? Here's a guy who just lied about absolutely everything he'd ever done in life, every degree, every accomplishment, his wealth. Everything was a complete lie. How did he get away with it? Well, there was no local newspaper anymore. The newspaper that would have done it in the past, Newsday, Long Island Newsday, is a shadow of its former self. They don't have reporters to go around and scrutinize and question candidates for Congress. So you have someone elected before anyone realizes, oops, we messed up. This person lied about absolutely everything. So how did he get the votes? He got the votes in part because of national branding. Rupert Murdoch, again, the New York Post, Fox News, convinced so many suburbanites that New York City was crazy, out of control, crime-ridden. Democrats were so far to the extreme. And folks, Democrats do have some problems. I'm not here to be an apologist for the Democratic Party. But Rupert Murdoch and Fox News Channel spent so much time, this was about 4 years ago, branding this message, creating this message of how all Democrats were so extreme that casual voters, just a part of that milieu, said, hey, you're right. Here's a candidate for Congress. He has an R next to his name. Must be better than these horrible, evil, crazy Dems. Click. And that's how someone like George Santos got elected to Congress, because there was no media coverage. Because most Republicans, I believe, if told, here's a candidate, if they were actually aware of information and said, here's a candidate who said he worked for Goldman Sachs but didn't. Here's a candidate who stole campaign funds. Here's a candidate who has defrauded people throughout his life. Here's a candidate who has lied about virtually everything. Do you want to vote for him? I think most Republicans would say, no, absolutely not. I'll write in someone else's name. I'll vote for an independent. I'll abstain, or maybe I'll vote for the other party. But they didn't have the information. And even though the New York Times purports to cover Long Island, because that is a part of New York State, they did a horrible job. They didn't realize it until after the votes were counted. Well, guess what? It's too late then. Final grab bag issue of the day. This revolves around former FBI Director James Comey. A rebuke in the Comey case. A federal magistrate judge berated government prosecutors for what he called, and quote, this was the soundbite of the day, indict first, investigate second approach. This is a federal judge saying this about Trump's Department of Justice attorney. Said it was an indict first, investigate second approach, ordered immediate production of grand jury materials and ceased communication to the defense, and questioned why an inexperienced U.S. attorney handled the grand jury without senior supervision. The order forces unusual transparency in how the case was presented and raises new questions about prosecutorial judgment. So a little background on this. I don't think it's even debated now. Any serious person who follows the news said, okay, Comey was indicted because Trump said, he's an enemy, I don't like him, I'm ordering the Justice Department to indict him. This is unprecedented in American politics. Whatever you think of Reagan or Bush or Clinton or Obama or Biden, they just never, ever, ever did this. There was always independence, the Department of Justice. So Trump is ordering people to indict him, and prosecutor after prosecutor said, I've looked at the case. It's absolutely meritless. I will resign or be fired before I do something that I think is completely unethical and illegal. So prosecutor after prosecutor left. And finally, and here's where I'm going to be politically incorrect, folks, but I'm going to tell it to you like it is. Trump found this low, and I mean really low-level attorney, Lindsay Halligan, never tried a case in her life, or never prosecuted a case in her life. She literally had more experience, more time spent as a beauty pageant contestant than time she spent prosecuting anybody. And Trump picked her by all accounts because he liked how she looked on TV. Now, here's the part where I'm going to say things out loud you're not supposed to say out loud. She is insanely good looking. She is absurdly, ridiculously good looking. If you were doing a primetime dramatic show about law and order, she would get the part as an attorney just because she's so insanely good looking and model-esque in her features. And Trump, by all accounts, that's how he picks a lot of his officials. That's how he makes judgments. That's how he picked Pete Hegseth. He looks good on TV. And too many people in the media are afraid to just point out what's true. He picked her. I'm not saying she's an idiot, but again, she has more experience on the beauty pageant circuit. I believe she came in third place in Miss Colorado once or twice. Nothing wrong with that. Look, Oprah Winfrey, Diane Sawyer, Martha Stewart, they all started off their careers as beauty queens. But she had more experience as a beauty pageant contestant than as a prosecutor. So when person after person at the Justice Department says, I'm not going to be a part of this sham, she's like, I'll do it. What the heck? I might get on TV more. This might be my Star Search moment, I guess is what's going on in her head. So she's like, I'll do it. Now, let me find some serious, savvy prosecutors here to kind of help me with the paperwork and show up with me. And guess what? No one did it. She made an absolute fool out of herself, signing the documents in the wrong place, double signing in a repeated way. She clearly didn't know what in the world she was doing. And the judge called her on this. The federal magistrate judge said, basically, this is a sham. Is this going to shame the, no, and I don't think so. Shame only works for people who actually can be shamed, and I'm not sure we have that in this Department of Justice. But congratulations to the judge. I can only imagine how much hate mail calls, threats the judge is getting, but I wish the judge, this federal magistrate judge, health and a long life. Okay, that concludes our grab bag section of the show today. What I like to do to end each show is to answer questions from you, specifically about my core area of expertise, communication skills and personal development skills. So at the end of every show, I take one question from you and one of my students. Now, you can always post questions right here, and I can answer those. But I also take questions that my students have posted and sent to me in advance as well. So if you are unfamiliar with me, I have more than 12 million online student enrollments in my online communication skills and personal development courses. So this one comes from Anonymous. So you don't even have to give your name if you don't want to. Anonymous is one of my students in the presentation skills, give a great team presentation course. So I will share that question with you now. How can I improve my presentation skills to support my self-development and prepare for a potential role change to the T&Q team in my company? And so I'm sorry, I don't know what the T&Q reference is, but regardless of what role you are about to transfer into in any company, in any organization, you can only enhance your abilities by improving your public speaking skills. I've never once seen anyone say, well, I went into this new job, but because my public speaking skills were so good, because my communication skills were so good, I got demoted. I've never once heard of that. Now, it is true, you can have great communication skills and get demoted because of other problems, but you're not going to be demoted because of stronger communication skills. So you're in the team building course. Now, a lot of people have this sense that, oh, I'm giving a team presentation. That's a separate, distinct, different, weird, unique thing, requires a whole new skill set. Not really. Because when you're giving a team presentation, only one person can speak at a time. So at that moment, all eyes are on you. You've got to be interesting and understandable to your audience. That is your job when you're giving a team presentation. So in a sense, there really is no such thing as a team presentation in any one moment. Now, I get it. I understand. You're giving a new business pitch to a really important client prospect, could result in millions for your firm. And 6 of you all have to stand up and give a presentation on why this prospect should hire you. That is a team presentation. I get it. I understand it. But what you have to realize is when you are speaking, all eyes are on you. Nobody's looking at everyone else. No one's looking at the other people who are about to present, who are just presented. So it is your job to be great, to be interesting, to capture people's attention. And the stumbling block so many people get into is they tell themselves, well, I'm giving a team presentation. It's not about me. It's about the whole team. Yes, but the way that translates into real life is people get together with their team. They start brainstorming on topics to be covered, bullet points. Before you know it, someone has put together this giant PowerPoint slide of 50 slides. And TJ, here's your set. Here's the 10 slides you do. So you think, okay, that's great. And then you want to practice with the team. So everyone gets together and they kind of talk through their bullet points. And then they congratulate themselves. Okay, this is going to be a great team presentation. Wrong. If you do that, you virtually guaranteed mediocrity and disaster. First of all, what you should do with your team presentation is what you should do with your own presentation. Ask yourself, what am I trying to get this audience to do? If it's get them to hire you, you have a clear focus. Then you got to ask yourself, what are at most the handful of ideas that will most likely motivate these prospects to hire us? Now you got to think of a story for each one of those points, maybe 2, maybe 3. Your success story, you're pitching a new advertising client. Think of advertising campaigns you've done for other people who are similar to them that they can relate to. Tell the story of how you helped that client. Give examples. If you're using PowerPoint, come up with visuals, pictures, image, graph, not bullet points with text. Next, you need to rehearse on camera. That's right. You need to rehearse on camera. When you're done, ask people, what do you remember? If they say, oh, TJ, you were great, really professional, smooth, that means I failed. That means I didn't communicate anything. So do not tell yourself, well, just because we're organized, just because there was a logical flow, just because we went from point A to B to C to D, it was a good team presentation. No, it wasn't. It's not good unless they hired you or you got your audience to do what you want and you actually communicated ideas that people remember. Here's the ultimate test. Before you give a team presentation to a new client prospect, find 2 or 3 people in your office who are not a part of the presentation. Maybe they're the newest people there, know the least about what you do. Give your entire team presentation to them as if they were the real client. Record it too. When you're done, ask them everything they remember. If they can't tell you the stories you talked about, the exact messages you were trying to convey, you know you failed. Go back to the drawing board. Keep practicing until you can get someone listening or watching your team presentation to tell you the specific messages you want them to remember. If you do that, you will be prepared to give a great team presentation. I'm TJ Walker. I want to thank you for joining me today. It's been a lot of fun as always. I have a great time here. I want to thank the 4,000 of you who joined me on TikTok yesterday and the collectively 500,000 people who spend time with me in some form or another every month during these first 2 months. You're either watching on one social media platform, listening on a podcast, reading the text version of this, which comes out in a newsletter. We try to reach people in whatever way is most convenient for you. So I do want to thank the 500,000 of you who are spending time with this show. And please, if you could do me a favor, leave a review on any platform you're on. Make sure you subscribe and sign up for notifications. Thanks so much. See you tomorrow.